This is India Tonight on ET Now. Let's talk about what we're expecting out of a possible Trump-Modi deal in the US. If there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, it's that he loves making deals. And if there's one thing we've seen from the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, it's that he knows how to leverage India's growing global clout. So as Trump gets set to welcome Modi at the White House, could we be looking at a fresh deal that could take US-India relations to a new high? And what would this deal actually look like? Trade, defense, technology, investment. There's plenty on the table, but how much of it is rhetoric? How much of it would be skirting around the impact of tariffs or the fact that India has all that surplus trade with the US? And how much of the Indian effort and Modi's bargaining skills will turn into real, tangible outcomes? Let's discuss this. Alistair Newton is with us. He's CEO of Alavan Business Advisory. Good as always to have you join us on India Tonight, Alistair. Now, Trump, like I said, a deal maker, but he's also known for his unpredictability, Alistair. How much of a priority is India to Trump right now?
India is a very big priority for Donald Trump. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But you're quite right. He is very unpredictable. We've only got to think of his recent meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, who certainly looked very surprised at Mr. Trump's proposal about Gaza. I don't think we're going to see anything as dramatic as that, to be honest. I think we will see a bit of a love-in between the two leaders. I wouldn't necessarily expect a great deal substantive to come out of this, but who knows? If there is anything substantive, I think looking at the agenda as a whole, it's almost sure to be good news for India, although Mr. Modi might not be able to get everything which is on his shopping list. For example, I would imagine that H-1B visas is going to be quite a contentious issue, but we'll see. We'll see.
India trades more with the United States than it does with China, Alistair, and Trump dislikes countries that sell more to the US than they actually buy from it. What do you hear Modi saying to Trump this time?
Well, I don't think a 46 billion trade deficit is too much to worry about, to be honest. India is not one of the top 10 trade surplus countries with the US by a long way. I think where we might get a little bit of tension between the two leaders is over oil. You'll recall, no doubt, Vikram, that as recently as I think 2021, India's top source of crude was actually the US, since when it has actually dropped quite a bit, and Russia has taken over as India's #1 supplier of crude oil for the very obvious reason, which is price. And knowing that Donald Trump has already asked the OPEC countries to reduce the price of oil in order to put more pressure on Russia over Ukraine, we might see a little bit of friction there. But if Mr. Modi is able to go to the US and say, we'd like to buy more US oil, then that's going to be a big winner on trade to start with, and certainly help to appease grievance which Mr. Trump may feel over the trade deficit.
So, Trump has called India the tariff king. He was particularly focused on a tariff that he said was blocking Harley-Davidsons from exporting more motorcycles to India. Do you see Modi having taken some of that edge of the charge by cutting down duties on those bikes in the union budget? Is that going to help in the kind of discussions and the negotiations that happen this time?
I certainly think it will help, but we do need to keep in mind that Donald Trump has recently promised reciprocal tariffs across the board. Now, how far he's going to follow through on that remains to be seen, because in some cases, the US actually has higher tariffs than countries which Donald Trump may be targeting. So we need to see how that works out. But I certainly think that Donald Trump is likely to ask Mr. Modi to try to ease some Indian tariffs still further.
So when you consider Modi's shopping list right now, and Trump himself has called Modi a tough negotiator, what do you see as a priority that would also work for the US, which is in Modi's shopping list? Would it be defense deals, these tech tie-ups, a stronger push to reshape global supply chains? What would it be that would be on top of that list?
Well, I certainly think that I'm going to come back to H-1B visas on this. Now, this may be a little surprising given Mr. Trump's overall policy on immigration and the pressure he is under from the likes of Steve Bannon, who is still very influential, to cut down the number of H-1B visas. But let's keep in mind that Donald Trump's friends in the tech sector are very, very enthusiastic about retaining H-1B. So I think that's going to be a very interesting debate between the two men, because obviously this is a very important issue for India. The other side of that coin, of course, is undocumented Indians in the US at the current time, estimated to be around 700,000 individuals. And Donald Trump is certainly likely to be looking for some support from Narendra Modi to repatriate at least a sizable portion of that 700,000 people to India. This is a potentially quite difficult issue, but it's also one where there could be a bit of quid pro quo for both sides.
Well, you're quite right in mentioning about the visa issue, and of course we'll have to see how much of that is being pushed through, and also these deportations that have happened, which have created their own political problems back home for Mr. Modi.
Yeah.
But both Modi and Trump have had their issues with Beijing. Alistair, and do you see this more aggressive US-India stance against China under the Trump administration, or do you think Trump needs to play ball with China much more before he gets more aggressive than he has?
Well, I think your guess over where Donald Trump stands on relations with China at the moment is as good as mine, to be honest, because he has swung backwards and forwards a bit in recent weeks, even since he got into office. We do need to keep in mind, of course, that he is surrounded by some notable China hawks in the White House. Elon Musk is an obvious exception, but he's probably the only obvious exception. I think what we are likely to see relative to China is Narendra Modi issuing a clear invitation to Donald Trump to visit New Delhi for the forthcoming Quad Summit, which, as you know, India is going to be hosting. And I do expect Donald Trump, even though he is not that enthusiastic about overseas travel, I do expect him to accept that invitation. And that will certainly be a step forward for India-US military ties generally, and also be important in the subject which you introduced this section with, which is how India and the US work together on China. Excuse me.
I have a very pointed question. If you were Trump, if Alistair Newton is Trump, what would he be saying to Mr. Modi?
I think he'd be very complimentary to Narendra Modi. I think he'll be congratulating him on the election result in Delhi, which of course was really important and historically a bit of a breakthrough to all intents and purposes for the BJP. I think he'd be looking to work more closely with India on technology, certainly on relations with China without necessarily being too specific. And I think he would be looking to India as a key American partner in Asia.
He, on his part, would be saying to Mr. Trump that, look, we have business to do. Let's cut a deal. Let's have a pact on a trade deal that's between the two of us, between US and India. How do you see Mr. Trump reacting to that?
Well, I'm very cautious about formal trade deals with the US. Now, I know that Donald Trump holds a great deal of sway with both houses of Congress these days. But if you look at Congress's track record over the last 20, 25 years on bilateral trade deals, generally speaking, the answer has been no. So I'm just a little bit wary of if Narendra Modi is looking for a formal deal because of the US Congress, but also because, let's face it, as Canada and Mexico have discovered during the course of the last few weeks, even making a deal on trade with Mr. Trump is not worth the paper it's written on if Donald Trump decides to change track.
Moving the needle is something that Mr. Modi is going to be working towards. How much Mr. Trump is going to relent, there is a world of possibilities, but also it involves the unknowns. One thing is certain, a Trump-Modi deal would be a great talking point. It will set the tone for relations between the two countries under the new American administration, and whether it's trade or defense or geopolitics, it's an important relationship to watch. Nothing to take away from that. Alistair Newton, thanks so much for your time and your insights. Appreciate it.